What is going on, everybody? It is Dylan with DFS, bringing you a brand new video. Today's video going over wide receivers to target for week 1 in DraftKings DFS, right? So there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of movements that's happened this offseason. So wide receiver right now is kind of challenging week 1 to really get some good answers here. So I'm going to try to break it down right. I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to go team by team. We can even go game by game, just make it a little quicker and kind of do it that way rather than looking at all the prices, just to make it a little easier on me and you guys as well. So starting off with the hopefully Carolina and New Orleans game. Here we go. Chris Olave, 6,600 against Carolina, I think is a solid option. The only other piece that I'm really looking at in this game is Adam Thielen down here at 5,200. I think he's kind of at that value spot, but just a little more. But in this game, it's not one of the ones that I'm kind of looking at for cash for either of these guys. But for tournaments, these are two guys that I definitely am targeting out of this game. Carolina they added some pieces, right? They got healthy. So they still have that defensive-esque mindset, right? But it's not there yet. I still think they're missing pieces clearly. But with Horn being back, that's a huge, in my opinion, lockdown corner for Carolina. I think he only gets better as long as he can stay healthy. And on the New Orleans side, right, their defensive backs are very, very, very good. Which is worrisome. And if one thing was clear last year is Bryce Young and Adam Thielen had a really good connection. Obviously, adding Deontay Johnson and Leggett kind of help all parties involved, right? You get some more talent around both Bryce Young and Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen getting older, not going to be the same wide receiver he was years before, but could still be reliable. So I'm going to go based off of reliability, which was Adam Thielen last season. Pittsburgh, Atlanta, this game is not one that I'm really targeting right now. Nothing really stands out. Like, yeah, you get Drake London 6K, but it's going against a Pittsburgh defense. George Pickens, same thing, 5,700 against an Atlanta defense. This game just seems like a very under game unless both defenses break down. So I'm not really targeting it. But Drake London, George Pickens, maybe Darnell Mooney at 4,200. Against Pittsburgh is another name to watch out for, but other than that, there's not a whole lot that I'm really looking at for DFS purposes. And then here we go. This one is where we start to hit some like cash wide receivers. And even then, it's still risky. But I'm looking at Khalil Shakir and Keon Coleman. These two guys are the two I'm kind of looking at as both viable cash options. Obviously, I think they're a little too pricey for being unknown, right? But one of these guys, if not both, are going to have a good game against this Arizona defense who's very, very bad, right? Arizona's defense could be good against Buffalo just because of the new wide receivers, basically, for Buffalo. But you still have Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, offensive line is what it is. James Cook still there. And maybe Arizona gets a good one here, but I don't think overall this season Arizona's defense is going to be good. So Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman are two names that I'm looking at. I think another one is Marvin Harrison, but he's very steeply priced. Like, I don't know if I want to target Marvin Harrison against a very good Buffalo defensive back team. I think Marvin Harrison's still going to get targets, could still have points, but a rookie wide receiver at 7,200 in a shaky matchup is not one that I'm in love with, especially on the road. So Marvin Harrison kind of not looking at. Obviously, if you're playing tournaments, you're going to want some type of exposure, but cash, I'm only really looking at Khalil Shakir and Keon Coleman in this one. Next is Tennessee and Chicago. This one's one that's very interesting. Keenan Allen, 6,900. DJ Moore, 6,500. And then Rome Odunze at 4K is so interesting. I think L'Jarius Sneed is probably going to see more DJ Moore if I had to take a guess. So I'm kind of looking at Keenan Allen, but Rome Odunze should have a good matchup against Tennessee. Obviously, Tennessee kind of changed a lot of pieces defensively, especially especially in their DB room. I think we're looking at 3 new starters in the defensive back room, maybe 4. But I know 3 for sure. Rome Odunze at 4,000 just really stands out. The other name to watch out for is I'm going to look at Calvin Ridley, right? DeAndre Hopkins is going to be a true question mark to decide if it's worth taking Ridley. If D hops out, Ridley's definitely an option. So is Tyler Boyd at 4,500. Whoever's facing Jalen Johnson, though, which is probably going to be Calvin Ridley if DeAndre Hopkins is out. It's you can't go against a lockdown corner. It's very bad. It's just not a good time. So maybe Tyler Boyd at 4,500. If Hopkins, I want to say if Hopkins is in, I like Ridley, but one of these two guys is going to be seeing Jalen Johnson, if not both, right? And that becomes very, very scary to target in DFS. Obviously, that means one's going to have Kyler Gordon, but I still think Kyler Gordon's good. The Bears' corners are very solid, and then you add some really good safeties behind them. So I'm not in love with Tennessee wide receivers in this week 1 matchup. I think overall in the season, yeah, they're worth getting, especially for the price points. But I'm more looking at Odunze, Keenan Allen, DJ Moore as some tournament pieces. Yet again, nothing really stands out in cash there. Then we go to New England and Cincinnati. Gonzalez is going to be back for New England. He was very good for the time that he was on the field before he unfortunately got hurt. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins probably going to see a decent amount of them. What I'm looking at is honestly Jermaine Burton. He's a name that stands out at 3,700. The other one, Andre, at 3K. Andre at 3K. Regardless of who's going to see slot, I think these guys split it, to be honest. But I think Jermaine Burton might see more snaps. But at 3,700 and 3K, those are 2 really solid pieces. Demario Douglas is another name I want to throw out there at 4,800. I still think this is probably at one of his higher prices, but Jacoby Brissett's going to be the quarterback. It looks like. See his prices last year, this was the good Demario Douglas to kind of target is the low to mid 4K range, and when he had that 6.2 game against Kansas City, tough matchup, but still Denver, Giants, Indy, Washington, Demario Douglas was pretty solid for a 4K price. Obviously not exploding, but still someone that could get you 10 points at 4K. Some weeks, the way values were last season, it was hard to find some really good values. It helped. It definitely helped allow you to get some other options. But yeah, going back to Cincinnati really quick, just Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. I think Jamar Chase is going to be there. I don't think there's a question that he isn't going to be there. T. Higgins obviously going to be there. One of them's going to see Gonzalez, but overall, I think Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are both going to have a good game. Obviously, one of them's probably going to be getting slowed down a little bit, but that means the other one should eat pretty good. And that's not saying the entire game. That's just a play-by-play on that. And then we go to Houston, Indy. You get Nico Collins 7K against Indy, Stephon Diggs 67, and then Tank Dell 5,500. On the Indy side, the only news we're watching is Josh Downs. If Josh Downs is out, obviously I think it's a tougher matchup for Indy with how good Houston's defense should be based off of the pieces they added this offseason. Michael Pittman at 6,800, it's a steep price against Houston. I'm more looking at Pierce and Mitchell at a discounted price here. More Mitchell than anything, I think, at 3,800 against Houston. But these are not cash plays. We're now in the 6th game, and I don't think we've really seen anybody stand out in cash for wide receiver. So this is what I mean. There's a lot of uncertainty in matchups, just a little shaky, right? So we know Nico Collins and Tank Dell, what they were able to do. Do we know how they're going to do with Stephon Diggs added to the rotation, right? Michael Pittman in a tough matchup against Houston, right? But do you know what Mitchell and Pierce are going to do? There's uncertainty there. I mentioned the uncertainty with the Bears wide receivers. They have good matchups. You just don't know who's going to stand out. Buffalo, Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, you could say Curtis Samuel, whoever the third wide receiver ends up being, has a good matchup. We don't know who the primary target is going to be through that wide receiver room. Cincinnati, I mentioned, we don't know who the official slot guy is going to be for Cincinnati. Hopefully it's Burton, just younger, looked pretty good in the preseason, but you don't know. So now we go to a little more, understanding of offenses. Miami against Jacksonville. This one stands out to me. If you're going to pay up for a wide receiver, it's Tyreek Hill at 8,700 against Jacksonville. I'm not worried about the injury. They didn't play. I don't know why I thought they played last season. Jacksonville's defensive backs I still think are bad. Their defense is going to be very shaky this season. But Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, we already know Odell's going to be out. Kraft is out, so we're looking at Baxton Berrios being the third wide receiver. I would imagine. I'm just looking at Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. I think they're two solid pieces, especially Jalen Waddle at 6,300 in this matchup. I think they're two solid pieces to start putting in your wide receiver grouping to really decide who you're going to get. And these afternoon games, like these last games, even though these two are noon, you start to understand a lot more wide receiver wise in this grouping. But going to Jacksonville, Christian Kirk 5,500, Brian Thomas 47, Gabe Davis 45. They're in some, I'm going to say, some bad matchups against Miami here. Their secondary is very scary. And this is another one. We know Christian Kirk, if he's playing, going to be the top target. Don't know how Jacksonville is going to use Gabe Davis. Obviously, they wanted him and got him. And it's the same thing for Brian Thomas. They obviously wanted him, got him. Don't know how they're going to use him against a shaky matchup here against Miami. Now, the thing is, their price is pretty good, though. 4,700, 4,500, 5,500. I think are some good prices. It's just the matchup is going to be scary. Obviously, if Miami does what they did last year and they're a very aggressive, fast offense, Jacksonville's probably going to be throwing the ball more, which means even though they have bad matchups, we could still see an increased amount of targets for Jacksonville to try to compete with Miami's offense. So that might be something to look out for. I think the pricing is pretty good, though, for that team. And then we go to one of the more expensive wide receivers on the slate, Justin Jefferson, 8,400. Now, I understand we have Sam Darnold as the starting quarterback, right? I think we aren't as happy about it. Obviously, Minnesota's quarterback room was going to be bad, nonetheless, of who they were pulling out. If J.J. McCarthy was there, I still feel the exact same as I do with Sam Darnold. Now, we were able to see Nick Mullins, right, put out some good games for Minnesota last season. And what did that mean for someone like Justin Jefferson, right? He still got a 29-point game against Detroit in Week 16. Then they play Detroit again in Week 18. 39 points, right? Plays Green Bay, better defensive backs there. Plays Cincinnati, better there, right? But 10, 10, 10, 14 for the targets, right? Still getting those targets regardless. He's Justin Jefferson. He's going to get targets in this matchup where the Giants defense, like if you take away their box, right, you just have their defensive backs, very bad defense. Now the front seven for the Giants, I think is very solid. I think it's very, very good. And if that defense is going to have a shot, it's going to be that front seven being disgustingly good to compensate for how bad and inexperienced the Giants' defensive back room is. So Justin Jefferson at 8,400 is a play I definitely love on the slate. This is definitely a cash play that I'm looking at. Obviously, I'm going to try to get him one of the more known plays, good matchup for this one. So I definitely like that. On the Giants side, Malik Neighbors, 5,900. I don't love it. I think Minnesota did a good job of kind of, I don't want to say rebuild their defense because they still have quite a few pieces there, but they added, I think, the right pieces to make that defense competitive for that team this season. it's hard for me to take a wide receiver with Daniel Jones as the quarterback. Obviously, with Darren Waller gone, you don't really have that kind of tight end scare as much and target needed as much as Darren Waller was. So maybe Malik Nabers at 5,900 gets those targets, right? Gets a deep bomb, right? He's very explosive. But you're playing against a Brian Flores defense, which is scary. We don't know how it's going to look in the regular season. We kind of saw some glimpses in the preseason. But betting on Giants offense is scary to me, especially Saquon gone, Darren Waller moved on. There's a lot of unknowns. Darius Slayton, I think, is a good price. Everybody but Malik Nabers, I think, is a good price to kind of go after, right? Wandell, 41, Darius Slayton, 44. These guys, good price. I don't know if I want to take a shot on them or Malik Nabers, but I definitely think in tournaments it's a good piece to kind of run back with Jefferson if you're doing that kind of lineup. Then we go to Vegas and LA. What really stands out to me, Devontae Adams at 7,600. I think obviously the quarterback play is not as good as him with Aaron Rodgers. I think we all understand that. We go back and look at his fantasy season last year, though, and we were able to see some crazy Devontae Adams games. Crazy. 45.2 DK points week 3 against Pittsburgh. And then we go to week 17 against Indy. 40.6. Devontae Adams is still capable. And that's with Aiden O'Connell and Jimmy Garoppolo. I think getting Gardner Minshew is a good piece. You go and look what Michael Pittman was able to do fantasy-wise. Josh Downs, was still kind of building in. The tight ends for Indy. And the run game was good. Like, Indy was a competitive offense team with Gardner Minshew. I think Vegas has that same capabilities. I'm looking at Trey Tucker at 3,500. He's a guy that stood out to me in preseason for Vegas at 3,500. I think he's a good tournament play just to plug in and allow you to pay up. Jacoby Myers, still a guy that was very solid for Vegas last year. You look at some of his games, and he did his job, especially at his price point. You go and look at his price point, and he started to go up when he had that early run. But you look out throughout the entire season, he's pretty much a 5K wide receiver and somebody that could get you 15 plus points at any given time. Granted, he's going to have some lowers, but I still think Jacoby Myers was solid here. So, yeah, all Vegas wide receivers I think are very playable. And Chargers, I'm going to go with Josh Palmer and Landon McConkey. Palmer 5,200, a good matchup off the rip, right? Players change every year. Some get better, some get worse. But I think Josh Palmer and Landon McConkey, especially Lag, kind of seems really solid at 4,700. Other than that, I'm not really looking at anybody else from the Chargers side. I think you could go pretty much any wide receiver, Devontae, Jacoby, Trey Tucker, Palmer, McConkey. You can go any 5 of those wide receivers and start plugging them in some lineups. Besides Devontae Adams, who's only is 7,600, which is the only price that kind of would dictate some roster shakeup. 5,200, 5,000. 4,700, 3,500. Those guys are your mid to lower priced wide receivers that you kind of like getting in your lineup. So I think that's a good matchup to kind of target. Denver and Seattle. This one I'm looking at Seattle, right? I'm looking at DK Metcalf at 6,200. JSN at 4,900. I'm looking at these guys to have a really good game against a Denver defense that has gotten pretty shaken down with talent. So those are 2 guys I'm really looking at. On the Denver side, Marvin Mims kind of stands out to me at 3,500. Cortland Sutton at 5,600. Yeah, like these guys are, I think these are good tournament plays. But Tyler Lockett, Josh Reynolds, I'm not looking at that. I'm just kind of looking at DK and JSN. Tyler Lockett, yeah, I don't know if I'm really there yet. I still think Tyler Lockett's a good wide receiver and a good fantasy wide receiver. You see some of his games he was able to do, getting you 20 plus points, but I think JSN is going to take a good leap this season. Him and DK Metcalf are going to do some crazy things. Courtland Sutton has just been a very reliable receiver for quarterbacks. Obviously, the quarterback play with Russell Wilson was able to, if you look at Courtland Sutton, a guy that got pretty much 10 plus fantasy points a game for the most part. 10 plus fantasy points a game at 5,600. I think it's playable. And then Marvin Mims, just the explosiveness that we barely saw because he was barely able to get targets, to get on the field. The way Denver ran their offense last year was just no words. No words at this point. But I think at 3,500, he's a good value play. Dallas and Cleveland, this one's a little shaky. I still love CeeDee Lamb here at 8,900 against Cleveland. I'm not worried about anything. I think he's going to be there week 1 facing Greg Newsome. I'm going to imagine off of Cleveland. I'm fine with playing CeeDee Lamb. Amari Cooper at 6,400, same thing. Even with Deshaun Watson being back at quarterback, I think with the way Cleveland's running back room is, like, we can go to it really, really quick and then we'll go right back. This is their running back room. It is very scary. I think Jerome Ford did his job, but I don't think he was an explosive running back that they're kind of used to with Nick Chubb. But going back to the wide receiver, I think that kind of helps someone like Amari Cooper. And Amari Cooper at 6,400, I'm loving it, right? We kind of saw him go up towards the end of the year, especially when Flacco gave him a 54-point game. But we had some showings with Watson earlier in the year. With Amari Cooper, I think this could be a matchup. Obviously, Dallas's defense is very, very good. But I think having Amari Cooper run back, if you're doing a Dallas stack for whatever reason, is good. And then we come to my favorite game on the slate for fantasy-wise, and this is the Commanders against the Buccaneers. We're looking at Mike Evans, 7,300 against Washington. Him and Baker had a really good connection last year. You were able to see some really good Mike Evans performances, especially early on. All right, 10 targets, 8 targets, 10. 171 against my Bears, unfortunately. That one hurt. But you were able to see 143, 162, some 2-touchdown games out of Mike Evans. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this game. I hope it doesn't turn into a stinker. I hope Washington's offense is able to move the ball against Tampa Bay's, and Tampa just doesn't run the ball. But Chris Godwin, 5,800, another good piece. Terry McLaurin, 5,600, great run back. Here's the crazy thing. What did Washington do? They replaced Jahan Dotson with Noah Brown, essentially. Like, cool. I don't know what they're doing, right? So Terry McLaurin, as of right now, is the only piece. We heard Luke McCaffrey was falling behind, apparently. I thought Luke McCaffrey was going to be someone they liked, and that was kind of the reason they moved on from Jahan Dotson, is they found something in Luke McCaffrey they liked. They drafted him, obviously. That's not the case. So Terry McLaurin, I think, is a solid run back piece if you're stacking Baker and Mike Evans. I've showed it twice now of what you get for that stack. But 5,600 for Terry McLaurin against a Tampa defense their defense is not the same defense. Obviously, you look at Terry McLaurin, he's not been a guy in his career, and it's not his fault. This is not Terry McLaurin's fault. Terry McLaurin has had not the greatest quarterback play. And you see the difference in wide receivers when it comes to good quarterback play and not so good quarterback play. And Terry McLaurin's had some not so good quarterback play his entire career. Hopefully Jaden Daniels, for Terry McLaurin's sake, is a good quarterback for him. I like this matchup. I think this is a good cash game, all right? And Terry McLaurin's a perfect piece at 5,600 to me. So hope you guys did enjoy the video. I will have the tight end video going out tomorrow. I don't know. I guess I have to look into it more. They don't have the Philly Green Bay game. I don't know if there's restrictions to it or what, but it's not a showdown, so definitely have to look into that. But I hope you guys did enjoy the video. Thank you guys for the support so far this DFS season. We haven't even started yet, and the amount of support I've gotten is huge. Hoping to just carry that momentum throughout the entire season to help you guys out. So if you did, leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.